2017, the hospital called in the police, having become aware of a greater than usual number of baby deaths and babies at risk of dying between June 2015 and June 2016.
They told me that there would be a lot more deaths and that I'd been linked to somebody that was there for a lot of them.
She was just 6 days away from returning to the ward before management finally allowed doctors to meet with the police, after yet another review failed to explain all of the deaths.
The very fact that the police, after listening to us for less than 10 minutes, realised that this is something that they had to be involved with.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate? Yes. Okay, so tell me about that. What concerns did you have?
I think we'd all just noticed as a team in general, the nursing staff, that this was a rise compared to previous years.
You created situations so that collapses or causes of collapses would not be obvious or associated with you.
I don't deserve to live, she writes. I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them. I'm a horrible, evil person. Then, in capital letters, she writes, I am evil. I did this.
You removed and retained confidential records of events relating to your crimes and checked up on bereaved parents.
This is how I felt at that time, Lucy Letby said. I could not see a future for myself. Nick Johnson replied, you are a murderer. No, I am not. You have murdered many children. I have never murdered a child or harmed any of them.
There was a deep malevolence bordering on sadism in your actions. During the course of this trial, you have coldly denied any responsibility for your wrongdoing and sought to attribute some fault to others.
Ms Letby told the court, we used to have raw sewage coming out of the sinks and coming on the floor in nursery 1. She added it's a contributory issue if the unit is dirty and staff were unable to wash their hands.
You have no remorse. There are no mitigating factors. In their totality, the offences of murder and attempted murder were of exceptionally high seriousness, and just punishment, according to law, requires a whole life order.
Parents would make milk feeds for their babies and prepare their breast milk.
I got nightmares in my head, I feel thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I feel.
What people watching will be thinking, I'm sure, is she has been convicted in a court of law with evidence considered by a jury.
Yes.
You want to have that overturned because you believe that there has been a miscarriage of justice.
Yes.
Have you got new evidence that could lead?
Since the guilty verdict, Letby's new defence team has held 2 press conferences to publicise the findings of a panel of international experts put together by Professor Xu Li. A renowned neonatologist, Li became interested in the case when he discovered his 1989 medical research paper on air embolism had, in his view, been misinterpreted by the prosecution experts. And
the Lucy Letby case was one of the most infamous in British legal history. Letby, a nurse charged with looking after young babies, was accused of actually murdering them. It shocked Britain, and when she was actually convicted in August 2023, many across the country welcomed the fact that she received an all-life tariff.
But not everyone did. Some people thought that poor Lucy was a victim of a conspiracy, including this handsome journalist.
Letby truther phenomenon, that is, people on the internet, medical people, journalists, surmising that actually Letby was innocent. I didn't believe that, and then I went away locked myself away and studied the evidence. I now believe that she's an innocent woman.
Some people have asked me to re-examine the case against Lucy Letby. You may remember I did around about 20 videos on Lucy at the time of her trial. And I have to say, the defense counter-argument is actually very, very compelling. The child killer's new legal team claim a waterborne bug, Stenotrophomonas multifida, was discovered in the breathing tube of baby 1, and infant Letby was convicted of murdering in October 2015, so right in the beginning. The same bacterium has been linked to the deaths of 6 people at a hospital in Glasgow, and the finding could help prove Letby's innocence, her lawyers say. I'd say that's pretty definitive already, wouldn't you? Back to the article. They have suggested sewage links on the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital would have harboured the bug and are to blame for the baby deaths. And there is some evidence to suggest that the Countess of Chester Hospital wasn't one of Britain's cleanest, wasn't the most sanitary hospital in the kingdom.
Well, that's a very entertaining story, but unfortunately real detectives have to worry about that little thing called evidence.
Uh-oh. Now, the trouble with this theory is that while the theory is very compelling as an academic idea, in practical, well, why didn't Lucy field this defense when she was on trial? According to the Daily Mail, significantly, Dr. Mike Hall, the defense expert neonatologist, was never called to give evidence in Letby's trial because he also ruled out the bug as being important. Well, so we can see why he wasn't called, and we can see why all you need to do now is call someone who will say, oh dear, it does look like there was a serious infection, especially if you're being paid big money in a high-profile case by someone desperate to get out of prison. I have found in true crime many are rotten at subtlety, and this case is nothing if not subtle. People are very good at recognizing the blatantly obvious, but they are terrible at subtlety. And true crime grabs the attention of the shocking and the blatant and the explicit. When it comes to things that are subtle, people just aren't really particularly interested. They don't find it exciting. And this includes things like statistics. In this case, the subtlety lies in the severity of the bacterial infection. So you could say bacteria could have done this, but it depends on how severe the bacteria is. Well, who cares about that? Back to the Daily Mail. In Hall's report on baby 1, also seen by the Mail, he says that the baby was found to be colonized but not infected by a bacterium called Stenotrophomonas multifida. Now, that's not a denial that the bacteria was present. It simply qualifies how serious the bacterial aspect was. Again, it's a question of subtlety. It's a question of degrees. And this is compared to how serious was the bacteria compared to the allegations against the angel of death presiding over baby 1. Back to the article. In other words, the bacterium was not to blame for baby 1's death, according to the expert. Letby's trial at Manchester Crown Court also heard that baby 1 was not ventilated and has been breathing for herself for some time, so did not have a breathing tube when she died. Now, why does that matter? Well, a dirty breathing tube would be an excellent explanation, an excellent reason for why baby 1 got sick and died. Back to the Daily Mail, there was also no evidence of pneumonia on an x-ray taken around 40 minutes before she collapsed. Now, that is also a huge problem because even if baby 1 wasn't on a ventilator, the classic symptoms of infection by Stenotrophomonas multifida is pneumonia, basically an infection in the lungs, although there can be urinary tract infections or heart valve infections. And so here's just a quick summary of the key infections from this type of bacteria. And what are they? Respiratory infections like pneumonia. Now, one thing Stenotrophomonas multifida doesn't affect is the stomach, and it doesn't generate massive air bubbles either. So in this case, not only are the symptoms absent of the bacterial infection that you want to make the perpetrator, but the cause of death isn't linked to any of those symptoms either, or the areas typically infected for that matter. Back to the article. There was, however, a large bubble of air in her stomach, the jury was told. Now get this, Lucy Letby was convicted of attacking baby 1 3 times over the course of 3 weeks before murdering her on the 4th attempt by injecting air into her stomach and bloodstream. Now, I repeatedly hear about there being no evidence linking Letby to these murders or the attempted murders. And I see some people have contacted me on X, and their version of arguing the evidence is undermining the person who provides the evidence. That is not arguing the evidence. And so I do beg to differ. Each dead baby is evidence, and including the evidence of their bodies and what is in their bodies. Lucy Letby being on duty when these babies die is evidence. What is your alibi, right? Also, a giant air bubble in an otherwise healthy baby is evidence. How did it get there? And the thing that gets me not only is one instance of this, but another and another and another and another and another. And it almost seems like the more instances there are, the more you say, oh, there's just not any evidence.
Well, that's a very entertaining story, but unfortunately real detectives have to worry about that little thing called evidence.
Uh-oh.
So if you have this narrative of a bacterial infection, it's a great narrative, it's a great defense. Do you have any evidence to back it up? According to the Daily Mail, there was no evidence presented at Letby's trial to show any of the victims contracted bacterial, any of the victims, not just one victim, any of them that contracted bacterial or parasitic infections linked to dirty water. And who came up with this defense of this dirty raw sewage? Well, Lucy Letby. So you're now going to take someone who's accused of being a serial killer, you're going to take what she offers as her defense, which obviously gave her a kind of a license to say she must have done this knowing that all along she could use this as her defense. And you're going to accept that? You're going to take that and go, yeah, I agree. And all of these babies dying, that is what it is due to. Now, I'm just wondering again, if this is Lucy's defense, and if Lucy absolutely knew she was innocent and a bacterium was guilty, why didn't she say so? Why didn't she say so when she had the chance? Why didn't she call her defense expert to say that? Why didn't she feel that in court at the time? And it's quite a simple thing. If this is true, it should be very easy grounds for appeal. If it is true, if there's evidence for it, is there evidence for it? And I have an idea why she didn't, because at the time it's easy to disprove, because you have all your exhibits, your samples, etc., all the people, it's all current. But let a lot of time go by, and then you raise your defense then, and it becomes harder, not impossible, just harder, more complicated, and less simple to prove. Another sly, subtle way of trying to win your case. Once again, many folks in true crime aren't very good at subtlety because this requires a little bit of understanding. For example, on the one side, how specific bacteria work. And if you can't tune into that, then the bacteria argument seems substantive when it really isn't. On the other side, you've also got to try and understand how a particular kind of human being works. There's, I guess, a little bit of subtlety in that as well. If you can't understand it, then the one thing just seems simple. The other side of it is, I think the reason this conspiracy finds itself in fertile ground is these days there's a strong appetite for the individual to blame institutions, to blame the government, and often they are to blame. But in this particular case, is that true? Is Lucy Letby completely innocent, and is the government, the hospital, completely to blame? And although there may be instances where that may be generally, to some extent, the case, you can't say, because I've got a gripe against the government, because I've got, even if it's legitimate, because I've got a gripe against government institutions, even if it's legitimate, that legitimizes this claim. This makes Lucy Letby innocent. It doesn't. Also, if the bacteria is the likely candidate with one death, by inference, it ought to be the likely candidate in all of the deaths, and then one has to ask, why didn't any other babies randomly die when other nurses were on duty? Another thing one could ask is, Why did the baby stop dying, especially when Lucy Letby was taken off duty? Was this raw sewage problem sorted out? If it wasn't sorted out, then how come they just stopped dying? Was there a link between the raw sewage being a problem and it being sorted out and these deaths? I guess we don't really want to talk about that because that would be taking on this whole thing in a scientific way. I guess another possibility is that Lucy's hygienic presence, because she was such a great nurse, uniquely excited the bacteria that were in the ward into a homicidal frenzy. It was just her biorhythms just had that effect on the energy of the bacteria. Now, going back to the article, although the bacterium was discovered in baby one's breathing tube in September 2015, the male has seen documents that show it had not developed into an infection when she died more than a month later on October 23rd. Strenotrophomonas multifilia, also known as Pseudomonas multifilia, it's a common bacterium found in soil and plants. It rarely causes problems for healthy individuals, but it is capable of causing pneumonia in vulnerable patients such as premature babies or people suffering from cancer and other conditions that compromise immunity. The key here, though, is pneumonia. You have to connect the disease to symptoms, but you can't. Back to the article, crucially, baby one's post-mortem examination shows no evidence of pneumonia or any other inflammatory infection, which would be expected if she had such a bacterial infection at the time of death. And so what are we talking about here? What evidence do you have to prove your case? Answer: no evidence. According to the post-mortem report, there was evidence of early-stage chronic lung disease due to immaturity and prolonged ventilation, but without inflammation or recent bleeding. And so the question is, did the baby die of no inflammation in its lungs or of a massive air bubble in its stomach? And the answer isn't, I'd like to believe the baby died of an infection in its lungs because I want to believe poor Lucy is innocent. Instead, the answer is, we know for a fact that there was a giant air bubble in baby one's stomach. How did it get there? The air bubbles were a favored way by the way of dispatching babies. Lucy used this method 9 times in total. Not once, not twice, not 3 times or 4 or 5. 9 times. By the way, did you know that searchers of Lucy's home found sensitive medical documents under her bed? Of the 257 sheets seized, 21 related to highly sensitive hospital records of infants that Lucy had allegedly harmed. Now, although this isn't the end of the world, Lucy's explanation for why the papers were there were dodgy as hell. Lucy claimed that she'd absently collected paper and simply forgotten to remove them from her pockets. 257 times. Not 2 times, not 5 times, not 7 times, not 17 times, not 25 times, not 57 times, 257 times. And they just happen to include the most sensitive documents, not things like vending machine or parking stubs or other irrelevant documents. Also, if Lucy absently put incriminating papers into her pockets, did she also absently place them under her bed? Lucy also claimed that she had no way of destroying these papers. Well, that wasn't true either. A paper shredder was found in her home as well. Why would she be deceptive on simple things like this if she was innocent? Lucy has twice tried to appeal her case, and completely independent panels of judges rejected her appeals on both occasions. The Thirlwall inquiry also rejected concerns about the safety of Letby's convictions. It's actually due out any time now. And so the question remains, is Lucy's case going to be reheard? Should it be reheard? And the test for that is, has new evidence been found? Well, has new evidence been found? And I don't expect that is going to change soon or even ever, but that doesn't appear to be dampening the faith of a growing flock of supporters. In any event, look out for the documentary coming out on February 4th, that's Wednesday, and also look out for my next episode, looking at the feelings of her parents in response. They're very upset about it, to this documentary, so look out for that. There's also a playlist on Lucy Letby if you want to get up to speed on my analysis. But for now, I'm not going to take it further than that, and I'll see you guys next time.